Hey everybody, it's Friday, July the 5th, 2024, and this is How to Restart a Church, a spin-off podcast where I, Pastor Trey Comstock, my friend and colleague, Pastor Emily Larson, talk about how to make church happen and how to make church happen again. This week, we will actually, in some ways, do what I originally envisioned this show as being about. The whole idea of this show was that, we are working to restart a church. And so some of it, which is what most of these episodes, is externalizing our research. We are learning about all these new ways to do church and the statistics that are driving our decisions and cool people who are doing cool things or cool authors who are doing cool things. And that's been most of the content. But there was this other part in my original vision for the show that was we're going to talk about some of the things that are happening here because either it's gone well or it's gone poorly. And maybe in our story, you might learn something, either what to do or what not to do. Anyways, and so what we're going to talk about today is actually something that I think we have done well over the past couple of years. And that is leading a congregation to be willing to make really big changes. That, I guess the business book or business book for pastors anyways, version of this is called gaining alignment or creating alignment, right? I tend not to, in communicating with people, I like to use words that don't make me sound like I went to business school because I didn't. I went to art school. And so this is, how do you help lead a congregation, or as a congregation, how do you get to a place where you look at massive scale change and go, yes, we need to do this. Yes, we are all committed to doing this. Let's go and do it. Because that is the place that now 2 years into our work here, that is the place we find ourselves, is we are on the brink of taking a huge leap as a congregation. Packing up shop and going somewhere else to prioritize the growing part of our ministry. And I really believe that the things that are going to happen. And I'm not sitting here sweating of oh my God, what are our people going to say? I know what they're going to say because we've had these conversations and we're in a place where we all understand that we need to do something huge. And I then think that over the next, 6 to 10 months, we're going to do something huge.
Yes. And I think that part of this journey is an important part to talk about, because we talk so much on this show about, finding your niche and being, authentic to yourself and trying new things and being what you need to be, even if that's not what you've been before. But maybe for a lot of our listeners, that is a difficult thing, because even if they are willing to make big changes or to see a vision of what their congregation or their church or their ministry could be, it's how do I get from this point to that point, right? How do I bring everybody along with that vision? How do we align everyone towards that goal, towards that mission, towards that vision? And that is something that is easier said than done. But to just kind of go through those steps of breaking down, here's how we did it, maybe that could work for you too, right?
Well, because it's the thing that we all talk about as if a church is never able to do. And then it can actually happen. I think a lot about this in terms of the denominational perspective, right? All the changes around LGBTQ inclusion that happened at 2024 General Conference, I didn't believe were possible until they were happening. And I think a lot of how those things happened too was a gaining alignment of, hey, in that case, hey, we've been fighting about this for 4 decades. And what if we find another way to handle this clear point of division in a way that lets us all stay a family? There was a real sense of alignment. And so when we landed here at Servants of Christ, or what I did, Emily came a little bit later. Um, we faced and continue to face like a truly uh, massive, it's underselling it, financial crisis. We just, set money on fire. And back in the kind of the first, year of it, it was we were always like 3 weeks away from we were so broke we were always like 3 weeks away from closing. We were always like one failed insurance payment away from having to shut our doors because we would no longer have insurance, and that was like a thing we faced every couple of months and be like, we may not be able to, do the absolutely like four essential things, which is like insurance, electricity, payroll, and water, right? Like, that is the real what is a church? What is a church financially? It is large, especially us who don't have a huge amount of debt. A church is four or five things financially speaking. You are a payroll, an insurance, a water bill, a light bill, and a debt payment. Like, that's what you are.
Yep.
Everything else.
Which budget is anyways, yeah.
We are five things. And so Servants of Christ financially is four things. We are payroll and insurance, water and light. And everything else is negotiable. But those four things really aren't. And we were always, and for us, we've talked about this a bunch, it's the insurance. And so challenge one is, hey, we are just financially unsustainable. Never were. Opportunity two is, oh my God, this amazing Spanish service is happening and growing and thriving, and Pastora Yenny and her team are doing something amazing, and the financial unsustainability has like really risks knocking out the growth that's happening here in this service that brings in folks and ministry and life change and powerful prayers and baptisms at Easter, and we're planning for 125 kids at VBS, and so many kids we had to buy a van, and it's just beautiful, right? And blessedly right now a lot of that is propped up by some outside funding that will not last forever. And so this was the state of play, and we sold a property a year ago that has basically floated us for a year. But that float is,
it's sinking. That float is sinking.
I'll put numbers to it, right? Across all the people who spend money on this church, it's about $500,000, and this church is going to bring in like $250,000 or less this year, right? Like that's the scale of the utter whatever, and $100,000 of that $500,000 is insurance, or more than $100,000 of that is insurance. And so that's the like state of the problem. Also, we have a sanctuary building that is the majority of our floor space, and the majority of that building is utterly unusable to us because of long-term maintenance issues, right? Like the sanctuary seats 1,000 people, 1,200 people, which we don't need it to, and it's unair conditioned, so even if we wanted it to, it couldn't. The roof leaks in multiple places. This room, if the sweat on my brow is showing, it's because this room is only mildly air conditioned. It's about 10 degrees cooler in here than it is outside, but it's 110 outside, so that's not great. And so all of that creates this like soup of unsustainability. So, massive change is needed. And traditionally, churches don't do massive change well.
Right.
So what we began... Go ahead.
I was going to say, and that's understandable that change is slow because we have such attachment to things like buildings. These sacred spaces that we create are the home to memories like I was baptized here, I was married here, my family went here. And we tend to put very sacred importance on the things, on the stuff, on the building. And then it becomes very hard to let go of what once was, or the vision of what once was, because of this nostalgia, because of this importance that we have put there. So that can make it difficult to move forward when it's time to vision, when it's time to make the next step.
And on top of all these structural issues, prior to 2 years ago, the board, our leadership team, and the United Methodist Church in particular, like we put a really high emphasis on our leadership boards. They're sometimes called administrative councils. They're structured in couple of different ways, but essentially, like the lay leadership of the church is really meant to serve as a city council, and the pastor is really just the like an elected mayor, or like a mayor with the administrative function, but not the like carte blanche decision making. That this is meant to be shared, and like this comes out like this is like a deep theological, philosophical nature. To quote a former United Methodist polity professor, who I'll admit was largely discredited, he would use the phrase "the deep logic of the discipline." The deep logic of United Methodist polity. I love it when you can take a swipe at Scott Jones. Anyways, someday we'll unpack for you why I'm mad. But he would use the phrase "the deep logic of the discipline," but the actual deep logic of United Methodist polity is this like collaboration between the laity and the pastor. Our board wasn't meeting, and when they met, they were not talking about the problems. They were just kind of shuffling along, going through the dance. And that was about it. No one was really, other than the people, other than a couple of people in the office, no one was really looking at what was really going on. And so the first thing we did, that I'll admit was not genius, but was an important first step, is we started meeting regularly. We went back to, a church like ours, there's not a ton of, day in, day out decisions that we need the leadership board to meet. And so you could meet less often. I was just like, we are going to meet every month. We are going to meet every month. We are going to meet every month, and that's just how it's going to be. And so we started, and that first meeting was terrible. I did all the talking, and everyone else just kind of looked at me. And I just, the meeting was like 45 minutes long, and I was just like, hey, here's what's happening. And nothing, but and then we met again. And people kept showing up. And then we met again, and people kept showing up. And so that was the real first step of, we need to be meeting as a church. This sounds obvious, but so often it's like, we don't really need to meet about. No, you do.
You do.
And the other thing was, part of why I had us meet is I wanted us to collectively stare at the problem.
Yes.
Without, I'll tell you, I had absolutely no answers for what we were going to do in that first meeting back, whatever that was, last August or September. Mm-hmm. I just said, we need to look at, and then it was like, we need to look at these financials. And they're like, and I'm like, they are bad. I don't want us to panic, but they are bad. And then we would meet together the next month, and they were still bad. Mm-hmm. And so, and this is something I've done, across the churches I've led. And I think it is, if I have a point one, don't waste a meeting. Don't just meet to glance over, do a reporting function and move on. Right. Whatever the challenge or the strategic whatever, engage with that regularly in the meeting. Yes. And so for us, on meeting one and every meeting since, it is, we are going to look at these financials, we are going to talk about them, and we are going to recognize that they are horrific.
Not good. Yeah.
Horrific, mm-hmm. Right? I remember one of our early meetings, we were looking at end of year financials, and it was, we lost $180,000 that year. And I was like, well, what are we going to do? And I'm like, well, not that. What are we going to do? I was like, I don't know. But you're right. It's terrible. We can't do that again. No. We're going to lose even more money. It's fine. But that was, I think that was the real first step to the gaining alignment is we need to not be afraid to talk about the problems. Now, there's a real, when you have to read a lot of business books for pastors, and Lord knows I do, one of the things they talk about is like, look, you can't just build a burning platform. You can't just say like, the ship is sinking, we must all pull together, because people don't really want to be a part of a sinking ship. So you have to like be a little subtle with this of, this is the strategic problem. Also, here's the bit that's going really well. Or here's the bit that's thriving, or here's the strategic opportunity, right? Like, it is this balance, and for us, the way, the push-pull of the financials are terrible, the Spanish service is beautiful, right? And so we have this, like, piece of our strategic whatever that's going amazing. It's so cool. Oh, my God. And then also, there is this financial trash fire. Trash fire is mild. The great Chicago fire of church finance.
It is. But we've been in places that have been on fire before too. It's not that you want to build a burning platform, right? It's not that you want to say everything is terrible and we're all going to die. It is that push-pull of, here are the good things. But you also have to find the people that aren't afraid to look into the flames and say, this is where we're on fire, right? This is where... This is the problem, and we are going to face it head on, and we are not going to sweep it under the rug. But you can't have the people who are just going to be afraid in that room either. You have to have the people that are coming together and saying, okay, what are we going to do to fix this now, right? What are we going to do to be a part of the team that finds the solutions for this too? Because if you're just in a room full of people who are going to jump ship, that doesn't solve things either. I think it's also about the people that you bring into that room to align yourself with, to continue the journey onto. You have to have those brave individuals who are willing to stare that problem in the face too. And
but that's also a place where I think as a church leader, you have the opportunity to model, right? The business books for pastor thing would call this like a non-anxious presence. And I think this is one of those places where it really matters to be able to model, this is the problem. It is tough. I am not afraid of it, but we do need to work with it.
Yes.
And this, I don't know if I always do well with this. Church finances terrify me because, it's me and the people I love, and we've got to eat, right? So there is like a, and I come from a household that didn't, it's not that we didn't have enough money, but like, worrying about money is like a family systems thing with me. And so like, I am aware of all of that. And so it is personal to me, but if you're going to engage with this, like, you can't just be like, like, this cannot just be a meeting where we sit around and scream. Even if you just lost whatever we $163,000 in 5 months, which is a meeting we might have recently had.
Very large number.
But panic robs oxygen to the prefrontal cortex of the brain. So you're not thinking well. So don't panic. I guess, step 2, step 1 is like actually meet and talk about it. Step 2, don't panic.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's the reason it's on the cover. Don't panic.
Don't panic. It turns out, yes. So we didn't panic, but we did begin talking about it. And I think step 3, if this is a multi-step process, the step 3 is get everybody talking. And even if that is like them challenging your vision, them challenging what you're bringing to the table, them, not always knowing how to talk to each other. And we're having to do this all in 2 languages. And so for us, really early, we started doing bilingual board meetings. That they weren't bilingual before is the problem, but they are now. And so now we can all talk, right? So it is get everybody talking and seek that out, even if it is going to be challenging or even disruptive, not to like arguments, but like you have a really clear idea of what you think should happen. The person who really disagrees with that needs to feel comfortable to voice that disagreement, because to my mind, only by like healthily talking through sometimes deeply opposing ideas can we come to a better solution.
Yes. I will never forget a previous board model that you had created specifically with opposing viewpoints, because we needed every viewpoint in the room. And there was a time during COVID that a big decision needed to be made. And when the person on this far side of the idea and this far side of the idea both came together and said yes, we were like, that is a sign from God.
That's the answer.
That is the correct decision.
Yeah. So I think that's the other part of it. I deliberately make sure that part of this, like, make sure everyone gets talking, is make sure that a representative sample of the opinions of the congregation are in that room. Now, then also there's like relationship building pieces so that they don't all derail each other. But like, I've seen, and blessedly, like, maybe I learned this lesson at some point and literally design boards who are going to disagree with each other, hopefully in healthy ways. And then part of my job as leader is to make sure that that debate is healthy. But that, just builds echo chambers, because it's really always great to hear that your ideas are brilliant. And so I have been I sit on boards now where I am sometimes like the lone dissenting voice. And like, this isn't healthy. Like, you want to know why this nonprofit isn't healthy? It is because like no potential points of disagreement are in the room. And so we're not creating a collaboration of ideas. And so, yeah, I really think intentionally about, like, I want this point of view represented. I want this point of view of the long-term stakeholder, been on this property for 60 years, been here as an older person, been here since I was a child. She retired and moved away. But we literally had, like, my dad was on the building committee, right? Like, you want that. And then you also want the, like, been in this country 10 months, found this amazing new life, has this incredible vision for reaching out to the community. And you want those folks in conversation with one another so that we can all find our way, so that when we present some radical change to the Spanish serve, it's not like, the Anglos are just imposing on us again, right? And that when you present a major change to the Anglo service, it's not the people who have no history here are hijacking our church, right? Like, these are real ways this could go.
Right. Valid opinions.
Valid, like, and if we had been like all from the Anglo perspective, all from the Spanish perspective, yeah, they would be right. Like, someone was robbing somebody else, or someone was imposing or robbing, right? And you don't want that. And so, by building these conversations to include as many viewpoints as possible, and we would have board meetings that were literally 4 hours long. Because you have to say everything twice. That's part of it. So, like, 2.5 hours long if this wasn't translated. But, like, we would have to take snack breaks in the middle. like, literally, like, sometimes there would just be cake that would just show up. And God knows, like, it's just magically there was cake and coffee and water. This was back when the AC was dodgy in that room. So, cake, coffee, and water. But, like, so that over the course of these conversations, you're getting a representative sample of how the congregation thinks and feels, and they're able to hear each other. And then, this is pastor as kind of mediator, not in the, like, combative sense, but just as the, like, I want to I haven't heard this perspective. Let me bring this perspective in. Or, I really disagree with that. But, oh my gosh, like, thank you for bringing this into the conversation.
But
like,
I'm
I think that's been a big part of it.
convinced. Yeah, 100% a big part of this. And I'm 100% convinced that this is only possible by the grace of God. I think the kingdom of God is the only place where this model works. Because can you imagine suggesting that or proposing that in any other format anywhere? I mean, like, to politicians, for example. Hi, by the way, we're going to get opposing viewpoints at the same table, and we're all going to come to the same agreement for the betterment of the people, right? Maybe I'm just jaded with politics, because that is ideally how it's supposed to work. But, I've lost my rose-colored glasses when it comes to our current politicians. But um but this is the power of God, right? This is why holy
Yeah.
conversation can happen. We call it holy conversation in our bigger general conferences and our annual conferences, because this is how it's supposed to work. Is we're supposed to be able to have all of the voices at the table. We're supposed to be able to have all of the viewpoints brought forward, clergy and lay, every dynamic, and then we get to together find the way that aligns not our wills but the will of God, and then follow that.
Well,
And I think that it does take intentional work. Yeah.
Well, this is the I think the thing that, you know, one of the things that keeps me Methodist. It's a short list sometimes, but the idea of that we find the will of God in community, that we
Yes.
find the will of God by coming together, and
Yes.
that by the interplay of the community, and then this isn't original Methodist theology, it's just a big part of Methodist theology. I mean, shoot, this is like Quaker stuff too, right? The Quakers are so into this, but and they have a really specific process by which they do this, and they even do worship services this way, and it's remarkable. But it feels right that we come together, bounded by the Holy Spirit. And all of us carry a piece of that. And then, ideally, we're all bringing the best of what we've got.
Yes.
And by that healthy, relationship-driven, yet not always 100% agreeing interplay, right? There's real debate. We don't have arguments, right? We are literally physically heated sometimes, but we are not heated. But we are not I remember I brought an idea that I had worked really hard on. It was the original plan for moving to the Milby property. And it basically got shredded over the course of 2 hours. And it wasn't the right idea. It was the best I could do given the fixed points. But from that initial presentation, it took us 4 months to arrive at, this idea really isn't going to work. Not because it's a bad idea, but because there's all these structural things that make this so limiting that it doesn't let us achieve our vision. And so then that kept it going. And so I think that the last piece of this, because I could talk about this for hours, because it's been so much of my life for 2 years, is you really do kind of have to, as a team, sit with something for longer than feels reasonable. I am notorious in my own personal life of being go, 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 go. And then I also suspect in the churches that I lead, I then come off as frustratingly slow of, oh my God, why are we still talking about this? Oh my God, why haven't we done anything? And I'm like, well, I'm waiting for the right idea to emerge organically from this process. And sometimes, especially when you're doing it in translation, especially when you're doing it in our context, which is multicultural, but this is even when we were not in a multicultural setting, this was true, there were changes at Grace that I knew we needed to make, and then we didn't make them right away because I needed everyone to get there. And then eventually we got there and we made those changes. But it wasn't that for that church. There was a lot of healing that needed to happen. And also we needed to say goodbye to 50% of our friends. And we didn't know that at the time when we started. It's okay. I wrote about that in next week's piece. But there really is you have to, we had to sit with it. I was meeting with one of our leaders, talking through at some point we're going to roll out what these big changes we're making are, I promise, but we're hinting at them. But just explaining to her the big changes and, she really having a sense of peace with it. And I was like, yeah, and I know it's been a really meandering journey. And she's like, the journey was important. And this is a lady who has sat through 30 hours of board meetings with us going, it was long, but it was important, right? That we couldn't, and I think, compared to the previous 2 years, we're about to see an action-packed 10 months. Mm-hmm. And we couldn't do that 2 years ago.
Right.
We can only do this because we sat with this together for 2 years, that we got everybody, as many voices as we could at the table. We started meeting regularly. We started actually talking about the problems. We stopped wasting meeting time. These 4-hour meetings were not like the report of this committee and the report of that committee. No, it was like, yeah, I have this question. I need more information about this. Well, I feel this. Well, what if we tried this? It was months of that. I'm so mad that we can't do this. Same, brother. Same, sister. But that's the reality. Like, it was those kinds of, like, deep, intense. I finish every board meeting utterly exhausted. But I have my family would periodically, when we're like 3 hours in, it's like, are y'all okay? And I'm like, great. This is hard. Because it is hard. I finished this past month's board meeting with a very brief speech of, does this feel hard? It is hard. It's hard. Feels hard because it is hard. What an amazing thing that we're doing this together. And then I think, that there really is a weird slowness that's not inaction, but is finding the right action. You got to balance that, right? You could talk this to death and never do anything, and that's not right either. But there is an element in our experience of needing to sit with it, and then when the right idea is in the room, and you've built this alignment about these are the challenges that we face, and because these are the challenges that we face, now you can start to comprehend the scale of action that we need to take. There was a time when we were talking about literally knocking down this sanctuary building. Mm-hmm. And there was a woman in the congregation who had grown up in this church, deeply attached to this building. She's, an older retired person now. And she's like, it hurts. But we may need to do that. That we had the folks who had been in this building forever willing to knock over this building, willing to leave this site,
which is a miracle.
For the sake of the ministry. And the process by which we got there was like actually meet and don't waste those meetings. Get as many people talking as possible and actually have those conversations. And sit with it and allow ideas to be proposed. You never know who's going to throw out the best idea. Weirdly, the idea we're going to go with is going to look a lot like some ideas that we introduced a year ago.
Yep.
But the right combination of things weren't in place yet. That's how we got here. It is not like a clean and linear process, and took 2 years and I'm only mildly exaggerating, 100 hours of board meeting,
right. Very
entire
close to 100 hours for sure.
Just dozens of hours of talking it out. And again, maybe if you are doing this only in one language, it will go a little faster. But there was, and I walked into it with this process. I didn't know where we were going to end up in this process, but I had this process in mind because for me, it's what's worked before, and certainly it's the thing that's worked here. If we've done anything right, it's we've done this. And I remember fairly early, first few years, I had a church finance person that always would find a way to make the financial numbers look good for when we reported them at the leadership meeting, even if they weren't actually good. And philosophically, I found that terrible. And then one Christmas, I got a call from the other church finance person. It was like, Trey, Pastor Trey, the church is broke, and we're borrowing money from the building money to float the church. And I'm like, why am I just hearing about this now? And we had to radically alter how that church talked to itself, how they talk to
Yes.
each other. And I basically called every member of the leadership board into the principal's, into my office when I got back from vacation in January, and personally talked through the finances with them so that they would all internalize the scale of the financial problem. Again, there were other wonderful things going on at that church, but the finances had fallen apart because we built a building, and then that building had created an additional financial strain, and so giving was split so many different ways, and we hadn't really communicated all of that, and we hadn't really thought it all through, and it sorted out, and that we got through it. But part of how we got through it is we all had to stare at the problem
Yes.
and then work through it.
Yeah. We talk a lot about being our authentic selves, from the pulpit, being our authentic ministry, whatever you are, be authentically that. That includes being authentic with ourselves too. Being fully transparent is so important. And I think that does help to waylay some of the problems that churches are facing today, is when they're not transparent with their people, and then something comes out and everybody's surprised, right? So being authentically you, but also being authentic and transparent with yourself, with your leadership board, with your congregation, within the own structures of leadership that you have built within the church as well. 100%.
Well, yeah, that it is that we are neither only doom and gloom, because if God is present in every church, and so God is doing something, and so every church that I've ever served, and we at this point, between you and I, we've served a lot of them. A lot. God is doing something awesome in every church. So it's not that oh my God, everything is terrible. It's not. But where there are challenges, we need to if I've had success, it is in actually always dragging those into the light rather than sweeping them under the rug and saying, no, everything is fine. I also, by the way, I do this with our higher ups too. The people I report to know where we're good and where we're not good, right? Because to me, no one gains anything by we're just going to ignore these problems. Ignoring them or sweeping them on the rug doesn't make them go away. Instead, it just limits the people who could help you solve that problem. Anyways, this is literally my whole life, so we could go on, and no doubt we'll talk more about this, but if you noticed on the video version, Emily's video is frozen. I think her camera got too hot. So we're gonna call it a show. If you have thoughts, if you've had experiences in church change processes that have gone well, that have gone poorly, I would love to hear about them. thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. That is thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. If you want to more of us and watch us over the course of the summer slowly dissolve into a puddle, you can find us at Servants Now on just about everything. On TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, facebook.com/servantsnow, on YouTube, youtube.com/servantsnow, and servantsnow.org on the internet. This and everything else we do here in the Media Lab is made possible by a generous Innovators Grant for the Texennial Conference in the United Methodist Church. If you would like to support us, comment, subscribe, share, leave 5-star reviews on Apple Podcast. All of that makes us go further and makes us be more sustainable. Go in peace. Love and serve the Lord. We'll see you next time.